Untitled Chapter. Welcome back to another Mr. Vlog.
Alrighty, you guys, I am here at my mom's house now, and I'm standing in front of my killifish setup. These little guys, they ordered off the internet, and they're already starting to lay eggs, which is pretty cool. I've got them each in a 10-gallon aquarium here on the shelf, and then here are the eggs. But I'll give you a little tour through what we've got going on. So I've got two different species. Well, they're actually the same species. They're two different variations of the species, so they've been bred to accentuate certain traits. So these are Fundulopanchax gardneri. They're a type of killifish out of Africa. And the cool thing about these little guys is that they live in puddles, essentially. Small ponds that are not always there. So they'll be heavy rains and they will hatch out of their eggs, and then the cool thing is when those rains dry up and there's no more water on the ground, then the little guys will lay dormant in their eggs until the water comes back down, and that will cause them to hatch, which is part of the reason that I'm storing them out of the water. So these little guys are the gold variation of the Fundulopanchax gardneri. The female here, as you can see, is just packed full of eggs. You can see in her stomach there, farther back. And then there's the male, the more colorful one. And these little guys are very, very good jumpers because they jump from puddle to puddle in the wild to move from dry enough bases into larger puddles. So they jump a lot, which means that you have to cover up every little spot on the roof. You want a hood that seals all the way. I had to tape some cardboard over there to cover up even the smallest holes because they will jump out. And then on top, in the bare bottom tank, we have two females and one male. This is my breeding trio. These guys are the red variation, and they are personally my favorite because the male has some blue on him and he's just real pretty fish. The plainer ones here are the females. They look almost like minnows. The breeding behaviors of these guys consists of the male chasing the female into the spawning mop, where they will then rub against each other. The female will deposit an egg or two, and the male will deposit sperm, and that will fertilize the egg. And I've got to go through and find the eggs. I've already gone through the gold spawning mop. Now I need to go through the red spawning mop. You might be wondering what these spawning mops are. They're actually just green yarn that I have boiled and cut to a certain length to kind of emulate moss, so they'll spawn in the moss. You can use actual moss, but I find that these are much easier, so you don't have to care for them so much. And then up top here are the two containers, and I've got them labeled, so I'll take down the red container right now, and I've got the date that the first batch was taken out, and you can see in here there looks like what seems to be soil, and what this is actually peat moss, which is, it's a type of soil. And these little guys will lay their eggs in it in the wild, so that is what I'm emulating here, is some damp peat moss. I will put the eggs in, and that will prevent fungus from growing. I've already got some eggs with fungus on them in here because I had initially tried to do the water method where you leave them in a little container in the water, but they started getting fungus so quickly that I decided to grab myself some peat moss, treat the peat moss, and then put it in the container. Here's what a fungus egg looks like. Now these ones will not hatch and they need to be taken out. And then here's what the healthy eggs look like. And the advantages to the peat moss is that it is less likely that the eggs will spread fungus from egg to egg, whereas in the water they're going to be much easier to spread because there's a means of transportation for the fungus. These guys will lay in here for about 25 or so days until you start to see the little eyes of the baby fish developing. And once you reach that point, then you can add some water to the peat moss and the little guys will hatch, and there will be some tiny little Fundulopanchax gardneri swimming around, and then we will go on from there. But first we got to get the eggs to hatch. So let's go ahead and go through the spawning mop in the red tank and see if we can't find ourselves some eggs. Alright guys, so I've removed the spawning mop here, and before I've done any of this I just went through real quick and removed any of the bad eggs from the peat moss, which there aren't that many, and now I'm ready to put in the new eggs, and I can already see one right there. There is a little dot, a little clear ball, and that is a killifish egg. Now as they sit in the peat moss longer, they will turn more amber colored before they develop the eyes. That is just a sign of a healthy developing egg. So I'm gonna go ahead and go through and remove all of the little eggs, and I will give you a count on how many the red killifish have produced by the end of this. Alright you guys, so 10 minutes later I'm finally done going through the spawning mops for the reds, and the total for those guys, which contains 2 females and 1 male, came out to a total of 54 eggs, which is pretty insane. You know, I was only able to find 54 eggs. There very well could be some that got hidden amongst the spawning mops or fell off into the bucket. I try and be as thorough as possible, like I will find them in the puddles under the mops where I'm checking and everything. But yeah, this little container is speckled with them. They're real hard to see though because they're these teeny tiny little clear eggs. But hopefully I will have a high hatch rate just because they were 54 eggs. This doesn't mean 54 of them will hatch in the end, and then there's also a very low chance that all of them will actually make it to adulthood. Just gotta do what we can to make the success rate as high as possible, raise as many fish as possible to adulthood. But yeah, the reds produced 54, and I'm sure the golds weren't far behind because these two never seem to stop laying eggs. So we'll go ahead and seal them up and leave them be for the night. Well guys, the day has arrived to finally go ahead and flood the peat moss and see what little babies hatch out of these eggs. So we are going to go ahead and add some aquarium water. I've got some aquarium water over in that bucket. And we'll fill this up, wait about an hour, and see how many babies are going to go ahead and hatch this time around. So after about 30 minutes, we have our first signs of life. You can see there's some little guys swimming around in there. They're just real tiny. At this stage, they can barely even move. You want to wait and give them some time before they're free swimming, which takes about an hour or so before you start to move them into their little aquariums. So we'll let them continue hatching. So at this point we have lots of little guys swimming around. They're super hard to see. So we're gonna go ahead, take the turkey baster and sort them out into their separate buckets. So we'll see you after I get that done. So it's been about an hour. Got upwards of 50 babies. There's just too many to count, my goodness. But they are teeny tiny. These guys are the ones I first collected, so they're probably a little more comfortable. So I've gone ahead and put one of the little newborns in this container with a dime under it so you guys can get a size comparison. And you can see they are just so teeny tiny. I mean, look, compared to the date on the dime, that is just a tiny little fish. But they sure hate to be filmed. I mean, it is a pain in the neck so far to try and get these guys in frame. They just love to zip around, but at least they're free swimming now, which is good. From the side view, you can see that these guys are pretty much all transparent. You can see their little fins flapping around, and you can see their skeleton going down through their tail. You can see their eyes at the same time. One is visible through the skull, actually. And that little bubble in his stomach, if I'm not mistaken, is the swim bladder, which helps him to stay at a certain level in the water and stay upright, and just such a teeny tiny little creature. But yeah, now I gotta go ahead, start up on this other one, and come back to this one later and see if any more have reappeared. So wish me luck. So we've got them all in their own little boxes now. We've got red, 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 and gold. There were quite a few more red babies than there were gold babies. And now the last thing to do tonight is just take some of these brine shrimp and squirt them equally into each of the little aquariums to give them a snack, and then they should be good to go. Now it has been 3 weeks of these little guys growing in their containers. You can see here, I've got a dime behind them for size comparison, how large the killifish have got. Now, these guys are the biggest of the bunch, and they still haven't grown too much, but we do have to give them time. The more brine shrimp they eat, the bigger they're gonna get. I have heard that after a certain point, like when they start to get color on them, they will have a bit of a growth spurt. But you guys, I'm gonna go ahead and leave the video here. I'm going to try and give you guys an update in the future once these little guys get a little bit bigger and resemble their parents more. And I hope you enjoyed that little insight into the killifish world. They're an amazing fish, and if you like taking care of fish, I highly recommend trying out a species of killifish because they are so unique and they're just a whole lot of fun altogether. But you guys, that's gonna do it for this little adventure vlog. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. Thank you for watching, and one thing to mention before I say goodbye to you guys. No, I'm not wearing makeup. That is a black eye. I took a head to the eye during a rugby game, so yeah, that's what that is. Ta-ta!